Recently, I switched to Godot, and this is what I created. I guess the question is why? Why create games with Godot when I've mostly focused on making games with JavaScript? Well, the answer to that is simple. I wanted to make games and share them on Steam. But unfortunately, JavaScript doesn't lend itself to PC game distribution. With that in mind, I felt like I had two choices. One, use Electron to distribute my JavaScript games, or two, use a game engine. Initially, I thought about using Electron, but that would require me to learn a new framework, which in turn led me to a fairly obvious question. If you have to learn something new, what is the best thing that you can learn to achieve your objective? In my opinion, the answer to that question wasn't Electron, it was a game engine. And for that reason, and that reason alone, I switched to Godot. But I guess the next question is, why Godot? Why not Unity or Unreal Engine? The answer to that was simple. I was looking for something lean and open source. Godot seemed to be the best fit for those requirements. So how did it go? Well, I thought I'd break that down into pros and cons. And the first pro is that Godot is lean. Put simply, Godot loads and runs faster, which in turn means the development feedback loop is faster. The latter is good for my mental health. Of course, lean does mean less features, but the current version of Godot has all the features I need. Until that changes, Godot is good enough. The next pro is that Godot is open source. I prefer open source not because it's free, it's because open source projects tend to be driven by the product rather than profit. Commercial products tend to be run for profit by blood-sucking capitalists who are driven by the principle of shareholder value maximization. Recently, we watched in horror whilst Unity put their shareholders before their customers. Now, whilst that wasn't the reasoning behind me choosing Godot, it was a massive justification. The third pro is that Godot supports C#. The engine comes with two language options, GDScript, which is Godot's integrated language, and C#, which is a popular general purpose programming language. I use C# every day, so being able to drop into the engine using a familiar programming language was a major plus. Also, C# is just a really nice programming language to work with, and its popularity means there is an abundance of helpful information online. However, I'm not aware of C# bringing any performance bonus to the engine. I think it's there simply to facilitate people like me who don't want to learn a new language in order to learn a new game engine. The fourth pro is that Godot reduces development time. Granted, all engines reduce development time. That is basically the engine's main purpose. However, it would be dumb not to mention this as a pro. The engine got me from idea to product in days rather than months. And that statement right there is the only reason a game developer needs to use an engine. Put simply, the engine allowed me to focus solely on the interesting game-related problems, which leads me nicely to the next pro. Godot allows you to focus on gameplay and game art. The game I created was basically a clone of Asteroids, and thus the gameplay is pretty simple, but the engine got me there quickly. At that point, I could start thinking about other things, such as the reactive speed of the game controls, how quickly the player responds after dying, and should there be infinite lives, etc, etc. Basically, I spent less time thinking about programming problems and more time thinking about gameplay, which I personally enjoyed. I also got to spend more time thinking about the art style for the game, which I enjoyed too. The art went through a couple of iterations before I settled with the style I have now. Ultimately, you would have to think about gameplay and game art anyway. I guess what I'm saying here is that the engine allowed me to allocate more time to the user experience. If you're a game engine pro, nothing that I've listed here is really surprising. Personally, I'm sold in Godot. I'm going to be using it for all my games going forward. But the transition wasn't straightforward. I did encounter problems. However, most of my problems with Godot were learner problems that I'd expect to overcome with time. Nevertheless, here are some of the cons I encountered. Most tutorials use GD script. As I mentioned earlier, I chose to use Godot with C# because I have to use C# every day as a programmer. However, most Godot tutorials use GD script. This meant I had to spend time figuring out how to write the example code in C#. That wasn't always hard, but it wasn't always easy. In most cases, the Godot documentation came to the rescue. The documentation examples come in both GD script and C#. The other thing I struggled with is the concept of scenes. The scene architecture confused me. My pea-brain thinks of a scene as something that contains a collection of actors. For example, in Asteroids, the game scene would contain the following actors: the player, the asteroid, and the projectile. However, in Godot, there is a game scene, but within that scene, all the actors are scenes too. It's going to take some time for me to get used to this architecture, but again, I feel like this is a beginner problem that will be solved with time in the saddle. So, in conclusion, I'm really impressed with the results, and what you see on the screen now is my first Godot project. This is a fully playable, distributable game, which took 28 hours to create. That time included all the tutorials I did before creating the actual game. However, since producing this video, I've taken the game a bit further than that. I'm in the process of creating several boss scenes and a story arc for the game. In short, using Godot allowed me to think of the game as a distributable product rather than a coding project, and that is exactly what I want out of a game engine. I'll speak more about the boss design process in the next video. Also, I'm currently deploying this game for free on Steam. It's called Space Rock Armageddon, so subscribe for future updates. My name is David, and this is my quest to become an indie game developer.